All right, so Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, everyone. Inshallah, today we're going to be continuing with our tafsir. Today is day 20th, and inshallah, we'll be continuing with our tafsir. What we started out with yesterday, which certainly we went in some details with the ayah وَإِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً قَالُوا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهَا آبَاءَنَا وَاللَّهُ أَمَرَنَا بِهَا. And we said the context of that ayah is that the people of Quraysh, they basically used to do the tawaf around the Kaaba naked. At least not everyone was doing that, but they used to generally do their tawaf naked because they considered that, well, at least they gave it a narrative that that was because they had worn such garments and committed sin with such garments. So, in order to be holy, they decided, well, you would have to come in and not do the rotation around the Kaaba with the same garments, but you have to get new garments, and the new garments must be bought by from the people of Quraysh, or at least by what is sold around the Kaaba. And even when it comes to food, you cannot bring your own food. You had to actually buy the food that is there. And that's a way where, of course, they were making a business out of that, and not necessarily all for religious reasons, but of course you could see that they were really making a trade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's religion. So we did go into details, and we said وَإِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً. We also went with the detailed definitions, or at least detailed meanings with the word fahisha, and we talked about the difference between fahisha, badha'a, ittan, and dillan. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, ليس المؤمن بالطعان ولا اللعان ولا الفاحش ولا البذيء, that that is not befit a Muslim to be a ta'an, to be a person that would either bully others, which is ta'an, to bully them for their shortcomings, or to bully them with different nicknames, or to even start accusing others and so forth, or even harming others with different names. So that's a ta'an. Illa'an is a person that curses everything. So we did talk about that. Curses the situation, complains about the situation, etc. Il-fuhsh is basically to speak about things that are usually sexual, whether in graphic terms, or even to speak about it openly, whether with men or with women, or in private, or even on social media, or all of that. That's fuhsh. And il-badha'a is speaking about matters that are supposed to be private. So you're talking about going to the bathroom, and you're probably describing exactly what you had done, all of that disgusting stuff. That's badha'a. Okay, so we talked about il-fuhsh here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَإِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً, and certainly it equated immodesty with fuhsh. It equated immodesty with speaking on matters that are supposed to be private and speaking about them as in an open way. He equated that and said, وَإِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً قَالُوا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهَا آبَاءَنَا. Of course, they had claimed that they had a backup or a support or even a reference to back up their behavior. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, whenever they would engage in this type of level of illicit behavior, they would claim that it was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that gave them the support, or gave them the approval, or even gave them the reference to it. And certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had exposed that, and he said, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not order for al-fahsha, does not order for illicit behavior, and certainly illicit behavior cannot be something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ever approves of. أَتَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Do you say what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had not said? In other words, claiming that somehow you have a support, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never give any support for such a behavior, because it in itself basically is empty of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would approve of, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would only approve of a behavior that is one, based on justice, two, based on ethics, and we also went in some details with understanding justice and ethics and so forth. Okay, then we قل أمر ربي بالقسط. That's the ayah that I believe we left off at yesterday. قل أمر ربي بالقسط, and say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered in القسط, and we said القسط, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders in qist, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would only order for what is good. قل أمر ربي بالقسط, what is good, what is just, what is ethical. And in order to live such an embracement, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically taught us, how do we stay committed? How do we stay determined? How do we embrace this level of principle? If you were to say قُلْ أَمَرَ رَبِّي, and say, so we said it's not enough to cancel out a behavior, but you have to introduce something better. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, قُلْ أَمَرَ رَبِّي بِالْقِسْطِ, and say, my Lord Almighty had ordered for what is good, what is basically considered of high principle. How do I embrace that? Well, there are certain things that you have to apply in your life in order to live it as a day-to-day thing, which is وَأَقِيمُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ. And in order to start a certain lifestyle, you would basically have to connect yourself with the masjid to be your place of qibla, to be your place of destiny, to be your place of destination, to be your place of commitment, to be your home, basically, where you are gathering with the people that are doing their dhikr, gathering with the people that are committed to La ilaha illallah, gathering with the people that basically take it as a serious embracement. Give me a second. All right. Now the second piece of it is وَدُعُوهُ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. وَدُعُوهُ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. The word وَدُعُوهُ, ud'u, actually means to invoke. Yet, that's not necessarily always. Sometimes you will see the word وَدُعُوهُ to actually mean and worship him. So keep that one in mind, because oftentimes people might get confused with understanding that dua is the word wad'uhu is not always to mean necessarily to just make a prayer as what you would wish for, but sometimes it can also mean to actually make the ibadah itself. What is ibadah? And what does ibadah mean? The word ibadah is more comprehensive, exactly like what we said yesterday, than ritual. Ritual is a part of ibadah. Ibadah can be in ritual. Ibadah can be in principle. Ibadah can also be in what you would apply in legislation. In legislature, how you would define ethics, how you would define right and wrong, and so forth. That's also part of ibadah. So ibadah is not just what you would believe in, but it can also be what you worship. It could also be the principle that you carry, the legislation that you would carry. All of that is part of ibadah. Just keep that one in mind. You can see I'm not comfortable in the way that I'm sitting, so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Rabbi make that, traveling easy, because it's not going to be easy for me. All right, let's see. وَدُعُوهُ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. What is al-ikhlas? Al-ikhlas is basically, one, you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, al-ikhlas actually means to make something pure. Keep that one in mind. To make it pure. So whether I'm speaking about pure in its origin or pure in its details, and think of it as pure in the way that you're making it. Let's give an example. So if we're talking about khalusa, That is actually coming from the root sa to actually mean to derive something. It can mean to derive something, mukhlisin, to derive something, or the word sa can mean to derive something, could also mean to make something pure. So if I were to say asal khalis, we're talking about pure honey. If we're talking about gold khalis, we're talking about pure gold. Okay, then what does that mean? Means it is free and empty of anything but what that substance is. That's basically what it means. It is empty of any other substance, and therefore it only contains what is basically considered of gold or honey or whatever it is, and that's the same thing. That وَدْعُوهُ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ, whether what you would basically worship in other words, the way that you would worship, that it is based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had considered as approved to be a worship that He would accept. That's number one. In other words, you don't make your own worship, but it would be based off what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically sent in al-Wahi to be an acceptable worship. That's the first meaning. The second meaning is basically to make it just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, the intentions are directed at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for no other motive. For no other motive but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now we see mukhlisin is in two angles, as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taught, as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had inspired, as to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically gave us the reference that this is approved. And number two, it basically would mean mukhlisin, to mean that it is only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, Lahuddin, and we talked about Deen itself and all the different details about Deen. It's whether what you believe in Aqidah, in regards to what you believe about life, what you believe about Allah, what you believe about the hereafter, what you believe about the purpose of life, etc. All of that is part of Deen, but that's not exclusive to it. Deen is also what you regard as a reference to understanding what determines right and wrong. Keep that one in mind. And that's why, like we said in Surah Yusuf, it said, Fi Deen al-Malik. What is Deen al-Malik? Well, this is talking about the constitution of al-Malik, of the king. في دين الملك, he said دين الملك. He wasn't talking about the religion itself, but he was actually talking about the constitution, or what the king basically uses as a reference to rule this palace, this country, whatever it is based on. Okay, now that's the same thing. When you're talking about مخلصين له الدين, we're speaking about embracing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's deen in what you believe in what you regard as the parameters of right and wrong, the definitions of what makes ethics and what makes morality. That's deen. So therefore, we're speaking about مخلصين له الدين in reference and in intention. Let's do it again. We're doing وَدْعُوهُ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ, whether your worship, whether your invocation, or whether the way that you would carry it as a mission. So وَدْعُوهُ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ, it can also mean what you carry as a mission, as in da'wah. Where did you get that from? Because right here, did we not do just da'wah by telling them, well, my Lord Almighty ordered for justice. Now, وَدْعُوهُ can carry within it what was already taught to us within the prelude in the beginning of this ayah. قُلْ أَمْرَ رَبِّي بِالْقِسْطِ. Now that you learn it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَدْعُوهُ. So the way that you would call onto the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way that you would worship, the way that you would live your life, three things. the way you would live your life, in other words, the ethics that you carry, the principles that you would embrace, they must be based on the reference that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent. Two, they must be pure and only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning the motive must only be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كَمَا بَدَأَكُمْ تَعُودُونَ. Keeping in mind that the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you, and that you basically were created by Allah, you will come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will come back basically to be held accountable. كَمَا بَدَأَكُمْ تَعُودُونَ. That's one meaning. The second meaning, we're talking about كَمَا بَدَأَكُمْ تَعُودُونَ. Is this necessarily to mean fitrah? No, not in this context to mean fitrah. That you're ordered to follow fitrah as in other ayat. But this is not كَمَا بَدَأَكُمْ تَعُودُونَ, because this is actually telling us right there, فَرِيقًا هَدَى وَفَرِيقًا حَقَّ عَلَيْهِمُ الضَّلَالَةُ. There are two different groups. In other words, you have to determine which group do you want to be part of. فَرِيقًا هَدَى. There's a group that was guided. What is the word فَرِيق? The word fariq comes from the root faraqa. Okay, let me put down the root right there in order for us to see it. So here we go. The root, oh man, my faraqa. Sorry, but my letter ra is missing. Let's see if it will actually give it to me right here. The letter ra is missing. Okay, so imagine there's a ra right there and qa. Okay, oh dear. Oh no, it's not even working. Forget it, never mind. I'll write it down with my sloppy handwriting. Fa, ra, qa. Okay, here we go. This is faraqa. That's the root. Now, the word faraqa could actually mean to divide. Okay, can mean to divide. The other meaning for faraqa can mean to make into groups. Make into groups. So you're talking about classification. Okay, you're making into groups, and these groups, in other words, there's a certain division in between them. If you're dividing into groups, what made you put person A in perhaps maybe group 1 and person B in group 2? What is the difference between group A, group 1, or group B, or group 2? What's the difference between these two groups? You're either basing it on color or basing it on perhaps maybe numbering or size or volume. What was the difference? Now, that's the same thing when you look at fariqan hada. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that the classification is going to be based off on one, either the people that had chosen hidayah. What is al-huda? Al-huda is to know your destination. Think of it as a GPS. That's huda. Al-hidayah is to basically know, one, the road or the map to where you're going. In other words, to a specific destination. There's no way that you can, or you would need a map unless you are going to a specific destination and you're going to figure out the way to get you to this destination. You're not just using a map and just going randomly, but you have a certain destiny that you're trying to get to, and you're trying to either find the closest route or the safest route or whatever it is, and that's basically hidayah. Okay, now that's the same thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that there are two groups, separate groups, and that they cannot necessarily just camouflage in any way, because there's going to be one group that had chosen to basically go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By using what? Well, by using what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically sent in reference as al-qist. One chooses al-qist because that's what they recognize they were supposed to adopt. They were supposed to adopt the path to finding basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded as truth, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded as justice, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded as what they needed to embrace as a path of life. Okay, the second group that is distant, that is basically separated from the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had guided, is basically فريقا حق عليهم الضلالة. I want you to look at this one. فريقا حق عليهم الضلالة. What does that mean? So it didn't say فريقا ضل. It just said حق عليهم الضلالة. So it didn't say فريقا هدى وفريقا ضل. It didn't say that. It didn't say فريقا هدى وفريقا ضل, but it said فريقا هدى وفريقا حق عليهم الضلالة. Okay, what's the difference? فريقا حق عليهم الضلالة, you basically would say what that means is that another group, they basically حق, meaning that it was incumbent and it was something that was inevitable, that it was going to lead them to getting astray. Okay, incumbent, inevitable, that they were going astray. So what is that supposed to entail? When you say فريقا حق عليهم الضلالة, meaning that certain actions that you may choose, there's no other direction, there's no other destiny, no other trajectory but loss, but going astray. If you had chosen to basically not go to school, well, you're talking about 99.9% you're going to be working for someone else. 99.9% you're probably going to be trying to figure out different ways, and there's going to be a bigger struggle. But if you decide to go to school, there's a higher chance. Certainly, you may end up getting unemployed still, even if you go to school, but you basically have a bonus card that will give you more opportunities of employment, more opportunities of probably figuring yourself out, because you've got the tools to figure yourself out. If you still couldn't figure yourself out, something is definitely going wrong because you have the tools for it. You've got the tools of education, which basically can open your eyes to knowing the different routes, to knowing which doors to knock on, to knowing how to get to things. But if you still could not figure it out, well, it's either something, the system, or whether it's probably you just not knowing how to use these tools. Now, there's the same thing in Islam. If you basically were given guidance, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you that if you would not be consistent with your salah, be consistent with honesty and amana, be consistent with going to the masjid, be consistent with your akhlaq, be consistent with the way that you would engage in the mannerisms that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you about, well, the trajectory is either going to be one, in prison, or two, in complete ضنكا. What is ضنكا? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى قال رب لم حشرتني أعمى وقد كنت بصيرا قال كذلك أتتك آياتنا فنسيتها وكذلك اليوم تنسى. Let's look at that ayah for a bit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, whoever would stay away from the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the word dhikri can mean three things. It can mean dhikri as in the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning guidance, meaning at least you recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent tawheed. And it could also mean dhikri to meaning a certain lifestyle that you basically were consistent in. What kind of lifestyle did you embrace? And that's another form of dhikr. So, or another form of dhikr is to basically do that remembrance and repetition of the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so forth. So when وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكَ, then what's going to happen? If you weren't consistent, if you weren't consistent with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, weren't consistent with the principles of Allah, you weren't consistent with putting it into practice, you just wanted to live your own comfort zone, then فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكَ. Then the trajectory is that a life of ضنك, a life of ضنك, a life of confusion, a life of regret, a life of turbulences. That's معيشة ضنك. Now this person thought, well, I had everything under control. قال ربي ونحشره يوم القيامة أعمى. They were basically resurrected and gathered on Judgment Day blind. Well, he thought, well, I mean, I had everything. Why did you take it away? Why did I deserve this? Shouldn't I continue in the same trajectory, at least in the same beginning? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, no, no. كَذَلِكَ أَتَتْكَ آيَاتُنَا. The verses, the words, the guidance, it basically came to you. فَنَسِيتَهَا. How did he forget it? Did he really forget it? It just didn't occur to him? No. فَنَسِيتَهَا. When we say when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he will basically نَسِينَاهُم, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nasi, does that mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forgotten them? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forget. But that means ignored them. So here, فَنَسِيتَهَا, you ignored the teachings, and therefore now you would be ignored, and you will not be given, نسأل الله العفو والعافية, you would not be given the same privileges that you basically had at one point. So looking at that, when we're speaking about حَقَّ عَلَيْهِمُ الضَّلَالَةِ, that is to let us know what is the trajectory of this action that you carry out. So this A is basically letting us know that they basically had taken a behavior, they basically had taken a certain embracement, a certain ideology. The ideology, the vision, basically led to a certain behavior. The behavior led to basically being consistent with that type of behavior. And little by little, and year after year, they basically had become a completely different person in how they started out with. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَرِيقًا حَقَّ عَلَيْهِمُ الضَّلَالَةِ. It was inevitable. It was surely. It was going to be a clear trajectory. This is حَقَّ عَلَيْهِمُ الضَّلَالَةِ, that they were basically going to be in a ضلالة, in a position where they're going astray. They're confused about everything. You didn't put in your homework. You didn't basically submit your homework. Of course you're going to get a D. What did you expect? And that's the same thing. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us فَرِيقًا حَقَّ عَلَيْهِمُ الضَّلَالَةِ, what did they do? He said, إِنَّهُمْ اتَّخَذُوا الشَّيَاطِينَ أَوْلِيَاءَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. What did they do? Why did they deserve this? How did they get to this trajectory? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, let's put a semicolon right here. And then this is to explain. إِنَّهُمُ اتَّخَذُوا الشَّيَاطِينَ أَوْلِيَاءَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. They took الشياطين as what they embraced outside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was going to be an inevitable consequence. How did they take الشياطين أولياء? الشياطين, basically the word shayateen, the root is شَطَنَا. شَطَنَا actually means when you have a rope and then you throw the rope. Okay, so what happens? You're talking about the rope being distant. Or shatana also means to repel away something. Think of, when you have a magnet and you put the negative with the negative, and what happens? They basically start repelling away. That's shaitana. It's basically to repel away. So shaitan is basically the one that repelled away, or that was evicted from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that they had taken shayateen awliya. What is awliya? Al-wali is 1, an authority; 2, support; 3, al-wali is also the one that you would turn to in decision making. Okay, so what did they do? Well, they took a shayateen. Is this necessarily talking about the shaitan that we cannot see? Not necessarily, but this is one of it. They could have taken a shayateen, whether we're speaking about shayateen to mean a shayateen to meaning the jinn shayateen, or whether this is talking about the bad humans. They're also called shayateen. When they wanted to make friends, they basically, or subscribed, they subscribed, followed, or even followed in real life or virtually, followed the wrong people. When you follow the shayateen, you're going to see yourself basically one centered around their preferences of entertainment, their preferences of decision making, their preferences of what and what choices they make in life and where they're heading, etc. And then you end up basically either decreasing your chance of success or increasing your chance of success by choosing the right people. That's basically it. So here, إِنَّهُمُ اتَّخَذُوا الشَّيَاطِينَ أَوْلِيَاءَ. That's how it started out. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know this is how it started out. They either took the wrong friends or took the wrong center in life. What is the basis of your life? What is it that you consider as one, your vision that you follow? What is the reference? Two, we're looking at what support. Who's the one that's giving you support? Whether supporting you in the gaming or supporting you in your lifestyle and supporting you. Oh, when you took off your hijab, you look so beautiful. It's okay. We love you anyway. We all of that kind of support. And they think that, yeah, I just have to embrace and I just have to let her know that I still love her, whether she took off her hijab or whether she decided to leave Islam. You're still dear to us. We still love you, etc. إنهم اتخذوا الشياطين أولياء. They took a shayateen awliya, and certainly they gave them the support that even when they make the wrong choices, they basically are still loved. That's what shayateen awliya. But a wali, and a good wali, would basically say, I want the best for you. That's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would want for you. I'm not happy with the choice that you had taken by probably making or taking these people as your friends, or probably choosing not to do your homework, or choosing not to embrace Islam, or choosing not to make your salah, or choosing to start smoking, or whatever it is. I'm happy or not happy, and therefore this is how the difference is what you choose as friends, what you choose as one, a person that would lead in a certain vision, reference, two, or a group of support, or three, people that will sway or help you find guidance in your decision making. وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. There was another thing that happened that led to this consequence, الضلالة. يحسبون أنهم مهتدون. What is the root يحسبون? And what does it mean? يحسبون comes from the root حاسبة. حاسبة actually can mean to count, and hasiba can also mean to consider, and hasiba can also mean to perhaps you yourself, you thought of something, but it turned out otherwise. All right? So يحسبون أنهم مهتدون. They, one, counted themselves amongst those that were guided. They thought, hey, I'm actually doing good. I'm just fine like that. Thank you. I don't need your hidayah. I don't need all that da'wah that you're giving me. I'm actually happy the way I am. يحسبون أنهم مهتدون. They counted themselves as part of, yeah, I know where I'm going. Thank you. يحسبون أنهم مهتدون. They counted themselves amongst those that were successful. They basically had manipulated themselves. That's another meaning for يحسبون. They lived in a mirage, and they thought by living in this mirage that somehow this was heading the right direction, and that this was something that will basically lead them to a good consequence, when in reality, they lived in a fake image, a fake, a fake understanding of the reality of themselves, and they ended up really not doing something about it because they all lived under one impression. They lived under the impression that everything was going fine. They lived under the impression that they too were guided. They lived under the impression that they were just doing this the right thing. And that's يحسبون أنهم مهتدون. That's basically that meaning of it. Okay, ظن and حسب. ظن and حسب, they basically mean the same thing in terms of to perhaps maybe estimate something, make an estimation or make an estimate. Okay, both mean to make an estimate in English. But when you do الحساب, you basically put in an effort to somehow count something or to somehow think of something, and you're putting in a certain data, you're probably putting in a certain calculation. That's hasiba. Dhanna is not necessarily putting in any calculation, but you would think of something, you would imagine something, and you would make something of a higher probability just in your mind, but not necessarily based on data. Okay? Not necessarily based on data. Yet, when it comes to mu'mineen, dhanna does not mean that it is not based on reference. Let me give you an example. In Surah al-Haqqa, the sister was actually asking about the difference between dhanna and hasiba. In Surah al-Haqqa, what does it say? وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ فَيَقُولُ هَاؤُمُ اقْرَءُوا كِتَابِيَهْ هَاؤُمُ اقْرَءُوا كِتَابِيَهْ إِنِّي ظَنَنْتُ أني ملاق حسابية. Here's the mu'min. They were just dhanna. That's it. They just thought of that. They just had the impression that that might be true. No, aqidah is supposed to be firm. So here, ظننت أني ملاق حسابية is actually a yaqeen. For a mu'mineen, it's yaqeen. It is yaqeen. For the munafiqeen or the kafirin, it was right there that yahsabun, they basically had made certain calculations, or dhannu, or they probably had the impression, but not based on yaqeen, not based on truth. It was really nothing but a mirage, nothing but a self-manipulation. Okay, وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. What is al-muhtadi? It's basically the person that is right there embracing huda, and muhtadun, that they're actually amongst those that were embracing guidance. Okay, let's see right there. When it said كَمَا بَدَأَكُمْ تَعُودُونَ, it is similar, and when you say نَظِيرُهُ, you're talking about a similar meaning as in Surah Al-An'am, وَلَقَدْ جِئْتُمُونَا فُرَادَا كَمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. وَلَقَدْ جِئْتُمُونَا فُرَادَا كَمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. What is furada? Furada can mean in odd numbers, and furada can mean as individuals. This here, it's not that they're coming in odd numbers, but this is furada to mean as individuals. You're coming in, and this is basically you. All the different people that you were connected to, they basically are not here with you anymore. That's why it's in Surah Al-Furqan, يَا لَيْتَنِي لَمْ أَتَّخِذْ فُلَانًا خَلِيلًا. They would say, I wish I didn't take X or Y or Z or fulan, just fulan, that X of person. I wish I didn't take him as Khalila. What is al-Khalil? Al-Khalil is more than just a friend. Al-Khalil is a person that you feel connected to internally, you belong, you feel friends with, you basically would spend time with you. That's a Khalil. al-Khalil, you would also perhaps maybe ask them for support. Or if this person is not even caring about support, they basically are living their life reckless and careless, in a reckless and a careless life, etc., then they'll end up basically just living careless, as in this person that they had chosen as a Khalil. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically lets us know that on Judgment Day, many will say, لَيْتَنِي لَمْ أَتَّخِذْ فُلَانًا خَلِيلًا. What did happen? لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي عَنِ الذِّكْرِ بَعْدَ إِذْ جَاءَنِي. They swayed me away from dhikr when it basically had come to me. They were advising me. They were telling me. They were telling me about hidayah. But أضلني عن الذكر. What were they doing? Oh, come on, man, that's so boring. Let's talk about something else. Or probably mocking this person if they were to embrace deen, and they would mock them and think that by mocking them that somehow they're superior. And this is very problematic. That many times people would think that by bullying you somehow become in authority. You somehow become in power. And would think that if a person were to embrace akhlaq, if it's a smart person, he's or she's basically a geek or an idiot. And if somebody were to somehow pretend cool, bullying others and not caring about anything, that somehow that's because they have it all under control. When in reality, they have nothing under control. They can right now think that they have it under control, but certainly حَقَّ عَلَيْهِمُ الضَّلَالَةِ. The trajectory and where this will take them is basically somewhere else. ليتني لم أتخذ فلانا خليلا. I wish I had not taken X or Y and Z as a friend. لقد أضلني عن الذكر بعد إذ جاءني. It had taken me away from a dhikr after it had come to me. كما خلقكم أول مرة يعيدكم. The way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you the first time, He will basically bring you back in that same creation. The word فريقا تعودون or فريقا هدى, in other words, whether سعداء or أشقياء. Let me just comment on the word Sa'id or Shaqi. Does that mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us from the beginning, that He had determined that I'm going to be a person of guidance or a person of misguidance, therefore it's not my fault? I was determined, decreed, I basically were created to be a bad person? No. You were not created to be a bad person. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you free will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you free will. You could either choose to go to the masjid or you could choose to go to a bar. What did you choose to go to? You could either choose to do your homework or you could choose not to do it. You could either choose to wear hijab or you could choose to go out in different attires. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala force you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't force you, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know that when He had basically given us at-tashri' is two kinds. There's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically making a certain natural paradigm or a natural creation that He had basically created everything in the world. And that's basically that mashi'a kawniyya. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are two mashi'as. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically create you to do this or do that? No, He had basically created you to, one, if you had chosen to drink, you're going to get drunk. But if you had chosen to water drink, well, that means you're just going to get hydrated. You're getting hydrated. But if you overdrink water, well, chances are you're probably going to be killing yourself. And that's the same. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created a certain mashi'a kawniyya, a certain paradigm, a certain design in this universe. But وَلَا يَرْضَى لِعِبَادِهِ الْكُفْرِ. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept that people would basically commit disbelief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا يَرْضَى لِعِبَادِهِ الْكُفْرِ. Now, therefore, when you look at the hadith Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, what is حديث عبد الله بن مسعود؟ إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة. Our creation, we would be for 40 days basically in a nutfa, like a nutfa, meaning like a sperm, and then it basically goes in the stages that you all know. But then there's one question, that when the angel comes in, when they are 120 days old, basically in their mother's womb, the angel would come and say, "Oh Allah, is this person male or female? Oh Allah, is this person going the rizq? What is there going to be the rizq looking like? Oh Allah, what is going to be their life? How long will they be living for?" And then part of that is, "Oh Allah, shaqiyun aw sa'id." Is this person shaqi? Is this person going to make it or not make it to Jannah? Shaqi aw sa'id. Now, that doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had determined, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had pre-known what is going to be the choice that this person makes. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even write that? Why would it be kataba? This is not to mean decreed, meaning that you have no choice in deciding to choose another path, but this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator. He is beyond the time. He is beyond time and beyond space. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not confined where he could not know the future unless it happens. That's you, because you don't have the ability to know these dimensions. But for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is beyond time, he is beyond place, and therefore he knows al-ghaib. He knows al-ghaib. All right, so when we look at فَرِيقًا هَدَى وَفَرِيقًا حَقَّ عَلَيْهِمُ الضَّلَالَةِ, that's basically to keep us also as coming in with the same interpretation about shaitan, وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Why did it say he was amongst the kafirin? How did he become kafir? Well, he became kafir because he had chosen to be amongst them. He had chosen the path of delusion. He had chosen to be in the path away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's إِنَّهُمُ اتَّخَذُوا الشَّيَاطِينَ أَوْلِيَاءَ. There's another qira'ah, أَنَّهُمْ. Meaning what? So إِنَّهُمْ اتخذوا الشياطين أولياء. Another قراءة أنهم, meaning because they had taken the shayateen as their awliya. All right, so let me just see if there are any questions in regards to this one. So I'm just giving you really quick. What time is it? Okay, we've got some time. يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد وكلوا واشربوا ولا تسرفوا إنه لا يحب المسرفين. Stop right here. O children of Adam, take, where was it? Right here. يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد. By the way, you see this little, I don't know what you call it, flower right here. This is, whenever you see this one, you're going to go on the right side or the left side, depending on where they had their notes in, and it's going to tell you what that is for. This is ربع الحزب 16. So this is 1/4 of Hizb 16. There are 60 Hizb in the Quran, and there are 30 juzos. Okay? And this would be 1/4 of that Hizb. So let's see. يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد وكلوا واشربوا ولا تسرفوا. O children of Adam, take زينتكم. What is a zina? The word zina can mean one, beautification, cosmetics, or can be anything that I would regard as an adornment. Okay? خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد. Why did it say not في كل مسجد? Now, Why عند? What is عند? عند is near. So that's also an indication that honoring the masjid is not necessarily just inside the masjid, but around even the masjid, that you honor what this place embraces, what this place basically is holding and what it resembles. This place resembles dhikr. This place resembles salah. Al-masjid resembles a place that glorifies Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَن يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Whoever glorifies شعائر الله. What are الشعائر? الشعائر can mean all the rituals, salah, zakah, siyam, hajj, that's a sha'ira. That's one definition of sha'ira. Sha'air can also mean adhan, can also mean masajid, anything that resembles Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, you're honoring the prayer mat that you're praying on. You're not just putting it anywhere because you recognize that this is supposed to be something that I pray on. So therefore, I take it as a place that would be a place of purity. I would put it in a pure place. That's وَمَن يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Same thing, giving the sheikh, for example, the respect and the honor, just like kissing their hand, or the respect and honor of what you probably maybe would give them the respect and honor to come in first, or to give them the respect and honor to label them, or whatever it is, to give that sheikh, your Quran teacher, etc. That's part of, and teach your children that to give your teacher the honor is part of that, of honoring what they actually teach and what they contain. That's why before even doing teaching al-ilm, they used to teach adab talab al-ilm, the manners of seeking ilm. Because if the person does not have the manners of seeking ilm and respecting al-muallim, then they're not going to honor the ilm that is given to them. Respecting al-ilm, respecting al-ulama, honoring whatever that basically contains Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wahi, whether we're speaking about al-masjid or whether we're speaking about or even the field of the masjid. That's part of مَن يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. And that's the same thing when you're looking at the عِنْدَ كُلِّ masjid. Before you even enter the masjid, you recognize that you're going to a place that is holy. So عند كل مسجد. And وكلوا واشربوا, and eat and drink. ولا تسرفوا. What is ولا تسرفوا? Don't do it in abundance, or ولا تسرفوا, don't exceed the limit. We're going to talk about it. إنه لا يحب المسرفين. He does not like al-musrifin. Well, what does it mean? I mean, he doesn't like it. What does it have to do with me? إنه لا يحب المسرفين. That's in order to tell you, if he doesn't like it, that means if you become part of it, you're not part of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would embrace. You're not part of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would shed his mercy on. You're not part of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would look at. You're not part of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give guidance and support. That's what it means when you say إنه لا يحب المسرفين. You would look into what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes. And that's the same thing. If I were to say, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes this, then you would say, well, I'm going to do it. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes it, that means he would like me if I were to do it. When he says, إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ, that means if you were part of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not include you in his mercy. On Judgment Day, you would not be part of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may even get you into those dilemmas. Out of those dilemmas, when you might be facing certain dilemmas on Judgment Day, you will not be amongst those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would love and give what is basically best for them. So when you look at يَا بَنِي آدَمَ خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ, here's a question. Al-Qurtubi said there are 7 different matters in this. فيه 7 مسائل. مسائل, is it a question? No, this isn't. a question. This is basically, think of it as a bullet point. And al-Qurtubi said, okay, let's take every single word here and scrutinize it and understand it closely. So number one, Ya Bani Adam. Is this just talking about the children of Adam as Qabil and Habil? No. We are all Abna'u Adam. And the Prophet ﷺ basically said in the hadith that we are all not only Abna Adam, but we were all created from Adam. Therefore, whether speaking about African, Chinese, even though the Chinese want to believe that they're a completely different race, I mean, that doesn't make them different from the Jews. And many people would actually think that by somehow preferring or somehow considering themselves superior to others, that somehow they become better and they're able to somehow say that they have the right, the entitlement to a certain privilege. And that's the beginning in ideology of all the different dhulm out there, all the different oppression and injustice out there. So, Ya Bani Adam, this is to tell every single son of Adam, every single human being, that you're included in this. You're invited to embrace this in order to help you find guidance. خذوا زينتكم. So therefore, al-Qurtubi said, this is خطاب لجميع العالم. This is a discourse basically directed at all people. He said, even though the context of it, look at this one, the context of it was not necessarily to all the people. The context of it was actually rather different. Who was it for? The context of why this ayah was revealed, that was actually directed at the people of Quraysh. Why? Because they used to come in, and if they didn't have enough money to basically buy from the people of Quraysh the garment to do tawaf with, or they would do tawaf in their own garment, but then they had to throw it away, and it would be called al-luqa. They would have to throw it away, and then of course that means they ended up naked. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ, meaning you embrace modesty. You embrace the best garment that you would have basically going to the masjid. That's adab al-masjid. When you train yourself that one, this is also to mean زِينَتَكُمْ, your beautification lies in modesty. Your beautification lies in modesty, exactly going with letting us know that immodesty is fahisha. Immodesty, immodest words, illicit words, words that are sexual, etc., that is all immodest. That is nothing but an illicit behavior. The hearts do not like it, unless, what if I do enjoy it? If you do enjoy it, you got a problem. You got a problem. Why? Because remember, الأرواح جنود مجندة. Souls are جنود مجندة. ما تعارف عليها ائتلف. If your heart is liking illicit words and is liking illicit lifestyle, illicit behavior, you've got something to detox from. You have to do certain homework. Detox yourself from whatever that basically is inside that affected you in this way. You have to detox. How do I detox myself? خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ. When you go to the masjid, teach yourself how to embrace this place as a place of honoring what it embraces, dhikr. Teach yourself and force yourself when you hold the Quran that these are the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not any book. Teach yourself to honor the ulama. Teach yourself to honor ilm. Teach yourself to always be at the masajid. Whenever you get lost, go to the masjid. Go to the masjid. خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ masjid. Whenever you get lost, whenever you don't know where you're going, whenever you feel depressed, go to the masjid. But make this a commitment. خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ masjid. But that's not enough. There are other things There are other things that you basically need to embrace as a lifestyle. وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا. Now, certainly, like we said, I want to actually, before we go further in وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا, I want you to look at what al-Qurtubi said here. He said, even though it was actually specific, it was specific and the words were directed. خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مسجد, meaning take your modesty, take when you approach al-masjid. And this, in other words, if you were to say that this was directed at the people of Quraysh, this would actually mean this masjid is not necessarily every masjid, but this would be Masjid Bayt Allah al-Haram. Masjid Bayt Allah al-Haram, meaning Mecca, meaning al-Kaaba. And that the things that surround it is Mecca, that it is al-Haram. All right? Now, that was one thing. But here al-Qurtubi, he said, but it is actually عام في كل مسجد. So although the reason of revelation was specific to the Masjid al-Haram, but he said, but it is actually comprehensive to include every single masjid, whether that was a masjid in this city or that city, al-Masjid al-Aqsa, all of it is actually included. So that's why he said عام في كل مسجد. What is the evidence? لأن العبرة للعموم لا للسبب. Or another wording, العبرة بعموم اللفظ لا بخصوص السبب. What does that mean? That العبرة, the theme, is in the comprehensiveness, in the generalization in that statement, and is not specific to the reason of revelation. So العبرة بعموم اللفظ لا بخصوص السبب. So if I were to say, for example, do your homework, I'm probably asking you to do your homework, maybe question A to question Z, for example, but that's also to let you know that this is at all times, this is what I would expect from you, to basically do that. You don't need me to tell you to do it, because when you are mature, you basically take in the role and the leadership to lead yourself without you needing someone to tell you to do the job. That's what it means to be a leader. That's what it means to be mature. You don't need someone to tell you to do the job, because you know that you are basically supposed to be doing it. And that's something in parenting. Always teach your children that that's what it means to be a leader. You do the job without needing someone to ask you to do it. And of course, when you look at al-ibra lil-umumi la lis-sabab, that's basically to let us know that the general meaning, the general statement within the wording is not necessarily specific to the people of Quraysh, and that's the same with the rest of the Quran. And let's see right here. Some scholars actually said, well, من العلماء من أنكر أن يكون المراد به الطواف لأن الطواف لا يكون إلا في مسجد واحد والذي يعم I want you to look at this one. He said من خفي عليه مقاصد الشريعة. Look at the adab. All right. What did he say? He said, and some scholars, they denied and rejected that this is necessarily related to tawaf. And they said this wasn't in at least the timing and the reasoning of revelation during that time. They said it wasn't necessarily as directed at the tawaf, but it was because the tawaf is only in one masjid, which is in Masjid al-Haram. So they said this doesn't include every single masjid. And here, al-Qurtubi said, من خفي عليه مقاصد الشريعة, somebody that is not capable of seeing the standards of Sharia would be the only person to say such a statement. The only person that would say such a statement, meaning that this doesn't include every single masjid, is really a person that is not understanding the principles of the different principles in Sharia, and they would be not understanding something like al-ibra bi'umum al-lafzi la bi khusus al-sabab, that a general statement is to include every similar situation and is not specific to one masjid. And that's the same thing. It doesn't have to be. When I tell you to be, let's say, somebody tells you to be a person of principle. This isn't just now. This is supposed to be at all times. Whether you feel the consequence of punishment or what, and whatever it is, because you as a person of principle, you honor principle over anything. And even if that actually meant you losing certain privileges, because to you, the privilege is embracing the principle. That's the privilege. The privilege is to be a mu'min, regardless of how people perceive you, regardless of how you might lose maybe an opportunity at work or probably a certain opportunity, but to you as a mu'min, you don't care about dunya opportunities, because to you, the opportunity is to be amongst those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would consider as deserving basically the level of the deserving to be at the opportunity of a person that gets the opportunity to be at the masjid. Okay, خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد. Some scholars actually said for zina. I want you to look at this one, because زينتكم عند كل مسجد التطواف, basically. So right there, they said it was a lady that was Duba'a bint Amir. I don't know if she had become Muslim, but that was Duba'a bint Amir. I don't know why her name was even kept track of, that she basically would do tawaf, and that was before Islam. And of course, she would be naked, but then ask for anything just to cover her private parts. Like, oh, seriously, just that much? Okay. All right. Let's see. Here's in Sahih Muslim. Hisham ibn Urwa an أبيه. He said, كانت العرب تطوف بالبيت عراة إلا الحمص. That the Arab used to circumambulate around the Kaaba naked, except al-Hums. Al-Hums, basically those that were native of Quraysh, or those that were Quraysh or native of Mecca, basically. They used to and of course, the people that are coming from the outside, they would ask for clothes from al-Hums, basically, the people that are Qurashi slash Meccan native. They would be the ones that would basically offer the clothes, the men to the men and the women to the women, basically. And then certainly they would not be, that is al-Hums, they would not be in al-Muzdalifah. And all the people, they basically they would stand when all the people would stand at Arafat. Let's see. And of course, in other than Sahih Muslim, they used to basically say, hey, we're people of al-Haram, we're people of basically the Masjid that is the Kaaba, and therefore no one is supposed to go and do tawaf except with our clothes, and they would have to eat from our foods. In other words, hey, it's basically a business, like what we had said. Okay, so, and what about the person that, can they at all do tawaf with their own clothes? Yes, they would do with their own clothes, but then they had to throw it away right on the spot. So you would come in, probably do tawaf with your own clothes, but then you would have to throw it away right when you're done. In other words, you're going to be naked right on the spot, right there, and end up, of course, you have no option but to buy clothes from them as well. So it's not like you're carrying some clothes, with all that baggage. But of course, and you're talking about the very simple way in migrating, so they couldn't carry along with them too many goods, and certainly it was going to be all worn out. All right, let's continue. يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد. أذن مؤذن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ألا لا يطوف بالبيت عريان. When Islam had come, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم ordered. Now, there are mu'adhineen for the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. There are certain mu'adhineen for the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. And one is Bilal ibn Rabah, that's a known one. And two, you basically have Abdullah ibn Maktoum. That's also another one of the mu'adhineen. And there's also There's also who's the third one? Who can remember the third one? You guys remember the third one? Who could, if you remember the third one, I give you extra minutes. The third mu'adhin for the Prophet ﷺ. There, Bilal was known. There was another one. I'll give you a hint. Told you about him. He used to love singing. And then the Prophet ﷺ sees him when he was like a young guy, loved singing, and then the Prophet ﷺ put his hand on his chest and made the dua for him to embrace basically dhikr, and he becomes the mu'adhin later on because he had a beautiful voice. The guys were around him, just gathered around him. Who was that? Who can write it in the chat? No, it wasn't Abdullah. Wasn't Abdullah. I'll write it. No, not Hisham. Try again. No, not Haytham. No. Try. I'll let you guys say it at the end, inshallah. Okay. The Prophet ﷺ basically ordered that they would call out, "Allah la yatufa bil bayt uryan." No one should go around the Kaaba naked. Not anyone is allowed then to be naked. All right. And let's see. And Al-Qurtubi said, وَمَنْ قَالَ بِأَنَّ الْمُرَادَ بِالصَّلَاةِ. So some scholars basically said, and whoever said that what is referred to here is salah, so they said, well, that basically means خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ. Then they went into the word zina. Is this supposed to be a comprehensive word to mean any beautification? Like probably perfume, probably the nicest garment that you have, your nicest shoes, or what is it actually saying? So number one, some scholars actually said, no, zinatakum is a comprehensive word, meaning you go to the masjid, put on your favorite perfume, put on your favorite clothes, etc. That was khudu zinatakum inda kulli masjid. That's a valid interpretation. The second interpretation, khudu zinatakum inda kulli masjid. In other words, wear your best shoes. Your best shoes. And they said, فَزِينَتُهَا النِّعَالِ. Best shoes, in other words, you would pray. And other scholars actually, now one thing to say is that they used to pray with their shoes on. Okay, they would enter and pray with their shoes on, but it wasn't until Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, he was the first to take off his shoes at the entrance of the masjid, and then, of course, then they basically took it from him, and then out of respect took off their shoes there. I wonder where he got it from. Okay, let's see. And I think that someone has the name. Did you guys? Abu? What is that? Abu? Try reading it, Hudayfa. What is that? You get extra minutes. Abu Mahdura. There you go. All right. Yeah, well, I mean.
يا
Okay.
محظورة سمرة بن معبر.
Absolutely. Good job. Okay, let's continue. فَزِينَتُهَا النِّعَالِ. The Prophet ﷺ, where did they get that? Where did they actually get that this is referring to النِّعَال or referring to basically the shoes? Let's see. The Prophet ﷺ, they took it from the hadith. رواه كرز بن وبرة عن خذوا زينة الصلاة. قيل وما زينة الصلاة؟ قال البسوا نعالكم فصلوا فيها. When, of course, the Prophet ﷺ said, take the beautification, the zina of your salah. And they said, what is the beautification of salah? And the Prophet ﷺ said, wear your shoes and pray with it. Shoes and pray with your shoes on, basically. Let's see right there. So does that mean we should wear into subtracting 15 minutes. So put your shoes on. We're speaking about putting your shoes on right there. They used to pray with their shoes on, and certainly, like we said, that was. What about when the Prophet ﷺ basically took off his shoe during salah? He took off his shoe during salah. That was because Jibreel alayhi salam, he came to him and told him that there was some impurity in his shoe or on his shoe. And that's when he took it off. And then the Sahaba, they basically had seen him taking off his shoe, and they all took off their shoes. But that's when the Prophet ﷺ had asked them, why did you take off your shoes? And they said, well, we had seen you do it, so we basically went in accordance to what you had done. All right. Certainly, the ayah is indicating that we're supposed to be covering up our private parts, and a majority of the scholars basically said that it is fard min furud as-salah. Let me just stop here for a second, because we're talking about if it's fard min furud as-salah, what is that supposed to mean? Fard min furud as-salah, that it's obligatory during salah? I mean, we all know that you're supposed to be covering. So that's that area of question. Let's say I'm wearing a jibba, or I'm wearing a loose garment, and I'm not wearing an underwear underneath. Let's just assume, okay? Okay. And then the person, while they're making that sujood, they were capable of seeing through uh I guess, sleeve, or through the opening of their garment. They were capable of seeing their aura. Is their salah valid or not? That's the question. I know it's kind of weird that you would never think that that is a place of differences of opinions, but yeah, they had differences of opinions. What else, and why would they have differences of opinions? I'll just make the story and make the whole thing really short as much as I can, inshallah. Okay, so majority of the scholars actually consider that it's obligatory even to hide your own aura. Okay. And same thing if we're talking about women, even if no man is around, you still had to wear your hijab. But what if unintentionally it basically appears? What is the ruling there? So the Prophet ﷺ told Miswar ibn Makhrama, ارجع إلى ثوبك فخذه ولا تمشوا عرى. He said, go back and take your garment, and do not walk. In other words, even if you are home alone, do not roam around naked. Do not roam around naked and in nude. Even if you're home alone, have that haya. The malaika are present. Okay. Now I'll make the story short right there, and I'll look at this one. I'm gonna jump a little bit. In Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Look, and Sahih al-Bukhari at least, and in Nasa'i. Let's look at this hadith. عن عمرو بن سلمة قال لما رجع قومي من عند النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال that is the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم لي أمكم أكثركم قراءة للقرآن قال فدعوني فعلموني الركوع والسجود فكنت أصلي بهم وكانت علي بردة مفتوقة وكانوا يقولون لأبي ألا تغطي عنا استبنك. What does that mean? Amr ibn Salama, he was a young boy. He said, when my people, they came from the Prophet ﷺ's area, basically they met the Prophet ﷺ, and then they basically said, the Prophet ﷺ basically told them, let the one that has the most Quran memorized be the one to lead you in prayer. But Amr ibn Salama was just a little boy. Okay? But he was the most to have memorized Quran. When you're in your early childhood, you memorize things fast. He was capable of memorizing the most Quran. So he was so happy. Hey, he put me, and they all put me, because I had memorized the most Quran. They put me as their leader, the Imam. But he didn't know the details of Salah. So he said, Fada'uni. They called him and they said, okay, here's what you need to do during ruku'. Here's what you need to do during sujood. And he said, and I was the one to lead them in Salah. But he had some kind of cloak that was ripped. And they will tell his dad, ألا تغطي عنا استبنك. What happened? Well, his garment was ripped. And every time he would make sujood, his buttocks would appear. He didn't have enough clothes. Even his behind would all appear. So they said, don't you have enough garment to cover up your son's buttocks, basically? So that's when, of course, certainly they gave him enough clothes to cover up his body in order to make it as, appearable for salah. Certainly, he didn't necessarily have a aura, okay, because he was still a young boy, but still they recognized that, when he was making sujood, that was, hey, we need to give you something extra. And that's one thing, by the way, one beautiful thing. In certain cultures, they would consider only young boys would have their head not covered. So when a person is alim, they would have to wear a certain hat. They would have to cover their head. It was a way, kind of like a turban. Think of it as, just like a person in the army, they would have a certain hat or a certain covering on their head, or probably certain clothes, and that's basically an honor. That's an honor. It's like you are at this level, and that's the same thing for طلب العلم. For طلب العلم, sometimes it's important to teach them that there's a certain honor of what attire you wear, how you embrace it, and how you basically would take it as something that resembles what you embrace as in maturity and level. Let's see right here. We already did this one. So what we'll do is that we will stop right here, inshallah, for today. There is no class tomorrow, but inshallah, hopefully the days after, I hope I'm able to do it. Perhaps I'll be back, inshallah, on May 10th. Hopefully I'll be able to do classes even during the time when I'll be traveling, so hopefully, inshallah, we'll continue. So in the meantime, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah. All right. No questions?
I
All right.
have questions.
Okay, go ahead, dear.
Yeah, when here it said about uh, لقد كانت الرجال عاقدي أزورهم في أعناقهم من ضيق الأزور. What does it mean من ضيق? Is this tie or short?
So الإزار would be very tight. من ضيق الأزر, so the إزار would be very tight. So think of it as when your clothes, you're trying to basically tighten them. You're trying to basically make sure that they don't fall. You remember they didn't have the things that you would have today in making garments. So they would basically think of it as they would wrap it around their necks.
Around their neck,
Yeah,
إزار,
of course.
not رداء.
Yeah, it would be wrapped around the neck.
How
So
it comes إزار to go to neck? It's like رداء, go to neck.
no, remember you would tie it, and then the remaining piece of it, you would wrap it up around your neck.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, okay.
Down.
Maybe I can hold on. I'll give you maybe a picture of it. Let's see right there. I would think of Muritani. Maybe Muritani clothes.
Like
Okay.
shawl.
Maybe okay. Muritani. Okay, this is Muritani. No, definitely not. That did not expect that. You know what? اللباس الموريتاني. Let's do it this way. اللباس الموريتاني. الموريتاني. Sorry, I don't have the raw. الموريتاني. Okay, this definitely, I wanted men. Okay. الموريتاني. Oh, sorry, ladies. I'm trying, I'm trying to give you an idea, but the letter Ra is actually missing from my keyboard, and I'm not able to actually write the letter Ra. Okay. You see Mauritania? Mauritania? Okay. Let's see this one. This is Mauritania.
At إزار, it's down, right? The
Well,
lower part.
right. I mean, the Izar is lower part, but you know who else does that? Ethiopian, I think the Ethiopians in certain cultures, they would also dress that way. Hold on. Oh dear. Sorry, my keyboard is not being Ethiopian clothes, maybe
Yeah.
traditional. Let's do it this way.
Men.
Okay, I didn't mean women. Give me men.
Man.
Yeah, there you go. So they would have like a shell on top. You see it? They would have a shell on top. They would be carrying something with it on top, even though, let's see, right there. Hold on, let me see.
Like separated part, this like
Yeah,
shell.
it's like well, it would be holding it actually. It would be holding it, but it would be kind of like an like that extra piece, and then what the way that they would the way they would hold it, they won't let it hanging, but they will basically let it go on their shoulders.
Yeah, like separated part of the izar.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And same thing, I think Indian in Pakistani men clothes, they also would carry like no, not that one. They would carry a piece on their shoulders. There we go. Look at this guy carrying a piece on his shoulder.
Uh-huh.
Basically, these extra piece on the shoulders. Um, and I think what is that?
Mm.
Peshtu. I believe they also have something like that. So here we go, Peshtu. Carrying an extra piece. Well, this one's coming from the turban.
So how it comes عاقدي, they tied the izar, part of the izar in their neck.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, absolutely. They would tie it, and then the remaining piece, because it's very long, they would basically put it up their neck.
عاقدي.
You see what I'm saying؟
Okay. No matter.
مش ماشية معاكي.
ماشي بروبلم، ماشية، أنا بمشيها
انا
على.
بقول لك الزنار بيكون لانه طويل كتير، فبروح بربط اللي هو البنطال فيه، والباقي بدل من انه يقصه شو بيعمل فيه؟ بروح بلفه على رقبته
ما هي إزار مثل إزار اليمني.
زي ازار اليمن، بس
أي.
الباقي الخرقه البقيه هاي بدل ما
أها.
تضل تشر على الارض وتتلم على الارض، شو بيسوي فيها؟ بروح بلفها على رقبته.
ما بتخيلها، ماشي الحال، معلش.
اللبنانيه ما بتخيلوش هادي، بقول لك لا لازم شيء يكون اخر شياكه.
لا إنه يعني عم يلفها مثل الفوطة اليمنية، منين
ما
حيزيد؟
ما
يزيد
بلفها،
إيمان.
ما هو بلف من تحت، وبعدين لانه هو في ايش رابط الازار فيه؟ رابطه بهذه الخرقه. فهذه الخرقه اللي رابط فيها شو بيعمل فيها لما بتكون
زيان.
طويله؟ فبقيه الخرقه من كتر ما هي طويله شو بيسوي؟ بيروح بلف على رقبته.
اليوم أنا ما بيحطوا،
ما
بيعقدوها
في شيء
عقد
عندهم لانه
بإيدهم.
عنده اخر شياكه اليوم غير.
أي نعم، أي نعم.
عندهم right. Let's see. The sister is asking, does the term zina, adornment, include things like makeup and jewelry? Oh, good question. Fair enough. The Prophet ﷺ had mentioned that for women, وَلْيَخْرُجْنَ تَفِلَاتٍ. What is tafilat? Tafilat meaning that they are not going fragranced, that women would go out to the masjid, basically not fragranced, and that women would basically go to the masjid wearing certainly, I guess, your best abaya, but it has to contain the different regulations of hijab, the different regulations of hijab. That's what it means. All right. So for women, they cannot go, yeah, beautiful makeup and all of that. No, because it is part of a deen that a woman in front of non-mahram, that she would not basically be in zina, in beautification. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنْ, whether she's going to the masjid or whether she's going outside to the market. وَلَا يُبْدِينَ, let them not reveal their beautification. And certainly, if she's going for ibadah, then certainly not revealing and not revealing the beautification during masjid is even a bigger requirement. It is prior even than going to the market, because you're going for ibadah, you're going for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So certainly do not put on makeup and jewelry and dress up for the masjid, but dress as a hijab, as modest to the masjid for women. I hope I answered that one. And a woman is wearing a veil covering herself properly. Yeah, well, yeah, it's exactly.